Welcome back. So in our previous lesson, we identified our project stakeholders, and in this workshop, we're going to talk about how to develop a RACI matrix. So by the end of this workshop, you're going to be able to develop and analyze a RACI matrix of your own for your project. All right, so what is RACI or RACI? RACI is an acronym that's often used in project management. It stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. These refer to all of the possible responsibilities and roles of project stakeholders who are directly involved in a project. So, responsible stakeholders are those who perform and complete the task or deliverable. They're the ones who do the work. Accountable stakeholders on the RACI matrix are those who are, well, held accountable, right? So they're held responsible for the quality of the project, the timeliness of the project, or phases of the project. The C in RACI stands for consulted. So if somebody has that particular type of role, their opinion is needed, their input is needed in order to move on to different tasks within a phase of a project. These are often subject matter experts or SMEs. The I in RACI stands for informed. And if you are for a particular task or deliverable on a project, if you're described as informed, an informed stakeholder, you're somebody who just needs to be kept up to date and informed on task details or progress towards accomplishing deliverables. So here are the steps for developing a RACI matrix. Then I'll show you an example, and then I will actually create a RACI matrix so you guys can see what this looks like. So step one is to add the title. So you're going to add the project title to your matrix. Step two is to describe the phase. So maybe in your project, you have a specific title for your phases. Maybe you just number them. Either one of those will work. Next, you list out every task or deliverable in the order that they should be completed. You'll want to move chronologically from first to last. You'll include your stakeholders. You're going to list them out along the top of the RACI matrix. You'll want to list out every stakeholder who has a direct hand in completing any portion or task or phase of a project. Next, you're going to assign a role to each one of those stakeholders, whether they be people or departments in your company, using letters of the RACI acronym. So figure out what type of role and what type of responsibilities each stakeholder, each directly involved stakeholder is going to have in the completion of your project. And then finally, you'll take a look at your completed RACI matrix and you'll do some analysis. So you're going to assess your matrix just so you can see if you can spot any foreseeable problems and then make necessary adjustments to avoid those problems. So here's an example that I pulled from a CUNY open source lecture. This is an example of a RACI matrix. You'll see here that along the left-hand side, you've got all of those steps in the process, all of those tasks. And then along the top, we've got all of these positions, all of these different internal stakeholders here. And this is part of maintenance planning for managing project stakeholders. This is kind of a sample, kind of basic RACI matrix here. All right, so I'm going to show you guys, I've actually pre-recorded this here, but I'll talk you through all the steps that I did when I was putting my RACI matrix together. So you'll see here that I changed the title of the project to match up with the project that I'm currently working on. Then I move on to changing the name of the phase. So in this project, it's phase 2, execution, and we're rolling out a new website. Now I'm going to go ahead and list out all of the individual tasks and or deliverables in order, in chronological order from first to last. So you'll see here that I'm listing out all of the different tasks involved in this project. And I'm trying to be as specific as I can in creating this. The more specific you are, the easier it's going to be for you to develop your RACI matrix and continue to go back to it. Remember, this is a living document. You'll be changing this throughout the lifetime of your project. Now notice I'm trying to make sure to put these in chronological order. So thinking about kind of the beginning of my project, the beginning of this particular phase in the project, and I'm putting all of these out in chronological order. Okay. So now that I've got all of my different tasks, my different deliverables listed, I want to think about all the different positions that a stakeholder could hold, could take on in this particular project, in this phase of the project. So I'm listing out all of the different stakeholders who have a direct hand in how the project is going to turn out. So I've got site developer, the project manager themselves is also included on the RACI matrix because they're definitely a stakeholder as well. So I've got all of my different roles and responsibilities listed. Now is when I'm actually going to start to input the different roles here based on that RACI acronym for each one of the tasks in this phase. So you'll see here I'm going to choose the platform. That's going to be the first task I'm going to look at. I'm going to use the little drop down here on my RACI matrix template. And I'm going to figure out, okay, who is responsible, who's accountable, who should be consulted, and then who should just be informed of all of those stakeholder positions at the top and figuring out all of their roles and responsibilities there. So you'll see here, legal counsel, that's right, kind of my subject matter expert, right? So they're going to be consulted on choosing the platform. We've got some roles that are just going to be informed. For every one of these rows across, for every task, we want to make sure to have one stakeholder who's going to be held accountable, one and only one. That way you don't have any sort of confusion over who has that final decision-making power. You also want to make sure that in every row across, you have at least one person, one stakeholder who is responsible so that are in the RACI matrix acronym. You want to make sure you've got at least one that's responsible for doing that work. So you'll see here going across to my second task here, my second row, SEO optimization. Getting that research done, want to figure out, sometimes it's easiest on these RACI matrices to figure out who's responsible and who's accountable first, since you know that you must have an R and an A in every one of those task rows. So you'll see here, I've got my RACI matrix completely filled in right down to the bottom. Now's when I'm going to move into my analysis phase, which I'll go ahead and show you now. Okay, so you'll see here that after you have your RACI matrix completely built, you're going to want to go ahead and take a look at the results here. You're going to analyze your RACI matrix. And in doing so, you're going to ask yourself kind of 3 questions at the same time. Is everyone involved in the project phase represented on the RACI matrix? Take a look along that top row and see, do you have a column for each of those stakeholders that have a direct hand in project completion or phase completion? Next question you're going to ask yourself is, everyone aware of their role and do they understand their responsibilities? So does everybody know what is expected of them, right? And do they understand all of the responsibilities that they in their role have to take on? And then finally, just to avoid any project conflict, because project managers definitely have to deal with that, it's one of the things that they deal with most often, is, does everyone agree with the role they've been assigned? You want to make sure that all of your stakeholders that have a direct hand in that project outcome or that phase outcome, you want to make sure that they have buy-in. It's just going to kind of avoid some conflict there. So when we take a look at our RACI matrices, we want to see, are there any issues that kind of crop up? Are there any adjustments that need to be made before we actually initiate this phase of the project? So you'll see here, I've kind of zoomed in on my RACI matrix here, but this one actually has an issue. So go ahead, take a look at my example. I'll give you a couple of seconds here to see if you can spot what the issue might be. What's an adjustment that you know we're going to need to make just based on what you see here? Okay, let's see what you got here. So you'll see here we've got an uneven responsibility. In this case, there's too many R's on one person. If you look at our poor operations stakeholder here in this column, you'll see that right down the row, this is somebody who is really being over relied on and stretched too thin. So if I were to take a look at this RACI matrix, if this was the one that I was going to use for managing my project stakeholders and kind of maintaining my project timeline, I would take a look at this and say, Nope, we have to divvy up those responsibilities there so that not everything is falling on our operations team. All right, so let's try the next one. So what is the potential issue that you see? Give you a few seconds here to look at it. All right, let's see if you were correct. I see the issue right here is that there are two people listed as accountable for that first task. So for choosing the platform, remember when we are kind of planning out those roles for each of the tasks or deliverables in a particular project phase, we want to make sure that we've only got one person who's that final decision maker. At this point, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, and there could be some confusion about who gets to make those final decisions. So if I were going to make an adjustment here on this matrix, I would make sure to only choose one of these two stakeholders to be the accountable party for this particular task. All right, one more example. See if you can find the issue here. All right, let's see if you got it right. So in this one, there's nobody who's in an accountable role for that first task. So think about it, it's like the opposite of the last one. You'll see here that there is no person who's kind of overseeing that portion of the project or that portion of that project phase. So in this case, you want to make sure that you have somebody who is responsible and somebody who's accountable in each one of your task rows. Okay. So one and only one person who's accountable. You can have multiple people who are responsible for putting in that work to complete that particular task or deliverable. But again, you want to only have one person who's that go-to accountable person in each row. All right. So now that you've seen some examples, I'll go ahead and scooch my face over here. You've seen some examples of a RACI matrix. I kind of walked you through how I created my own for my project. And then we did some work on analyzing RACI matrices so that we can figure out what are the issues and how are we going to make those adjustments. Now it's your turn to go ahead and try to do this for your project. So use the Google Sheets RACI matrix template that I shared with you to create your own RACI matrix for the project that you are about to work on. If you do need help, I will be holding some office hours this Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. CDT. And if you need help in the meantime, as you're working on putting your RACI matrix together, you can contact me. My name is Melissa at hello@luckyacornld.com. That's my website there. So good luck, and I will see you for our next class, which is going to be on classifying project stakeholders. Have a good one.